Welcome to the I Fired My Boss franchise podcast. My name is Dan Claps, founder and CEO of Franchise Playbook, a franchisor platform where we create, own, and operate dynamic franchise brands in the mobile services space. And my life's goal is to help people just like you fire their boss and become a business owner. Welcome to another episode of the I Fired My Boss podcast with your host, Dan Claps. Very excited to have a very special guest that I've recently met through, I think originally through LinkedIn, and then we talked on the phone, and it made a ton of sense to have this gentleman on. Someone that fired his boss probably 2 decades ago. This is who we have as my guest, Steve Hart, the co-founder and CEO of PMI. Who is a franchisor for a long time now, and excited to share this conversation with you. I'm going to bring Steve on now.
Hey, Dan, thanks for the invite to your show.
Yeah, glad to have you. Glad to have you on here. Our show is all about people, getting into business for themselves, firing their boss, if they had a corporate job. So I'm curious, going back before you started this company, I'd love to hear how you got to where you are today.
Oh man, that story would take way too long. I'm one of those guys that tried working right out of college for the man and learned really quickly that it just kind of wasn't my thing. I think it was the way I was wired to be an entrepreneur. Ever since I was young, I was always trying to earn money. And I always wanted a BB gun or a rubber raft, or I wanted things, and raised in a family that didn't have a lot of money to provide those kind of things. My parents just said, hey, you want it, you have to go earn it. And so I was just one of those kids that was always mowing lawns, weeding gardens, walking, taking care of people's pets while they were gone, looking for ways to make money. And I think as I grew up and finished school and went out into the real world, I realized that working for other people, I just kept seeing ways to make money on my own. And so I was just always attracted to being an entrepreneur.
So really, it's been since you were a kid, it's always been in kind of your DNA.
Yeah, like I said, after college, I worked for a couple big companies. Oakley Sunglasses was one that I worked with. I also worked for a big airplane parts company and brokering airplane parts. And that's when I realized, hey, I could do this. These guys are just brokers. I could do this on my own, and started breaking away at that point. And then, of course, multiple businesses later, a lot of failures along the way. As you probably heard from other entrepreneurs on this podcast, being an entrepreneur isn't easy. In fact, in most cases, I've found it's even harder. And, there was plenty of failures on my path, but we found a way to keep things going. I say we, I refer to my wife. We had to work together, and she had to have that same mindset as well to make it through those tough times, to be gritty and support me in times where it would have been maybe best for our family to go get a real job, a job, and get a solid paycheck coming in. It took the two of us to join arms and support each other when times were tough to make it through. And I'm knocking on wood here. I feel like we've made it. We've built a brand now that is substantial. PMI is a property management franchise that we started 18 years ago. I was the co-founder, and we're now 18 years in, over 450 franchise partners that are building significant businesses for themselves, utilizing our brand, our systems, our technology, and things like that to help make property management just easier. And we've been really lucky, and we've got a bunch of great franchise partners that are helping us elevate our brand every day.
Amazing. But going back before we jump more into
Yeah.
PMI, you're working a job. You're married at this time when you were in the job world.
Getting married happened around that same time. Yeah. I
Okay.
was single when I was at Oakley, but doing the airplane stuff that I mentioned, I was married during that time. Yeah.
Okay. And then was there like an inflection point where you said enough's enough? I'm starting this business or
Yeah, yeah. What happened is I realized that this airplane business was banking on my connections with the airlines that I was working with. And I was the one that was providing the business. I was the one with my connections and relationships, was providing those kind of opportunities to sell airplane parts. And the business was just funding or financing those parts. So the only thing I was really leaning on from the business was the money. And there's a lot of money out in the world. I figured I didn't have it, but I figured I could find someone that had that. And that's when I started feeling like, hey, I can do this on my own.
okay. And so you start PMI. Was the intention we're going to build this thing and then franchise it, or did that naturally happen as you built the original business?
No, it was the other founder owned a property management company, and we started PMI in 2008. Any of your listeners that know that date recognize that it was a tough time for businesses, and everyone for that matter, especially if you were tied into real estate and construction, and that was the business that I was into at the time. And this friend of mine said, "Hey, Steve, with your real estate background, why don't you look into property management?" And I just thought he was crazy because, to my understanding, property management was a tough, doggy kind of blue collar level business that I didn't really feel like was my future. And but then he showed me that this industry was extremely fragmented. There were no national brands in property management, and you had an, a a market that was dominated just by small little mom and pop businesses. I mean, you think property management even today, there are no real big national brands. I mean, PMI is probably the largest, and most 80% of the property managers throughout the United States are one, two man shows, and they're all creating their own processes, their own systems. And we just felt 18 years ago that was a great opportunity for us to, kind of roll up an industry and package it under one brand, create the systems and processes to help these property managers just do it better, not have to create it on their own. And that's what we did. Property management, people have a big misunderstanding of. I think they think that at least 18 years ago, they definitely did. They thought that, property manager just collects a rent check and maybe finds a tenant for that property that's available. But the industry has really grown and really changed. To be a property manager, especially now, you've got to be able to provide dozens of services, and you do it all under one roof, all under one name. And it's called property management, but it's the maintenance, it's the leasing of the property, it's all the accounting, collecting those rent checks and then distributing that out to maintenance contractors that are being serving on that property, and then putting the money into the owner's account as well. But you're doing legal work, you're doing utility management, and the list goes on. And so, in other words, this industry that was great for mom and pops and do-it-yourselfers has now just really elevated, and the technology over the last decade that's come in is just tremendous. It makes property management easier to do, but you got to know what kind of technology to use. And there's not just one; there's a dozen or so
Mhm.
different technologies that you got to utilize. And so, it's made this industry just really optimal for a brand like PMI to come in, consolidate that, and be able to educate, train people, provide them all the marketing tools and things they need to grow a business and not just stay small like these smaller mom and pop shops have done over the years.
Right. It's so interesting. I feel like the best companies in the world, best franchise brands in the world, the playbook is a century old, multi-century old playbook,
Yeah.
right? I think back to, nicotine cigarettes in the late 1800s. You went to a local mom pop store, you bought them, you rolled them up, and then Lucky Strike, Marlboro consolidated that. Better examples, Home Depot was all, before Home Depot was all, mom pop discount retail or hardware stores. Walmart, same thing with discount retail. Massage Envy, what you've done. There's one. There was a fragmented industry. Now there's one brand that is the largest, and the customers get a consistent experience. People go to Starbucks not because I'm sure your service is amazing too, but where I'm going with this is Starbucks. People don't go to Starbucks because the coffee's great. They go also because it's consistent, right? There's a consistency to it. But I really think it's interesting for the listeners. Um, Speaking of Starbucks, I heard an interview with Howard Schultz. Have you ever heard this story? He was telling about early days of Starbucks. He had just gotten married. His wife was pregnant, and her father came, and parents came for dinner, and her father said to Howard Schultz, let's go for a walk, and basically said, Howard, you're a great kid. I love you for my daughter. What you're doing with Starbucks, my wife's working, she's making money. Your Starbucks is a hobby, and you need to get a job. And if you can imagine your father-in-law telling you that, he went home, he was like distraught, told his wife that night, and she basically said, "No way!" Like she was angry with her father, like, "No way, we're doing this." And he says it to this day. If she had said, he's probably right, there would be no Starbucks. So I think it's awesome that you've had that support throughout the journey. That's awesome. So listeners, that's good. That's why if you're looking at franchises, make sure it's a collaborative effort between you and your spouse.
Yeah. Or let me add, if you're just an entrepreneur and starting a business of any kind, make sure you have a good, I call it a workout partner, but make sure you have someone that can be in your corner, because there's going to be times that are tough, and you're going to need someone in your corner to say, "Hey, keep going. You got this." And it's nice if it's your spouse, your partner, business partner, whoever that may be, because you are going to need to be buoyed up multiple times as an entrepreneur.
That's a great point. So if someone is exploring from the customer side, someone's exploring using a property management service, what is the kind of the elevator pitch, or like the thing that makes PMI really different that your franchise partners are communicating to that potential customer?
Yeah, well, aside from all the products, the service that we offer, we really hit home on that, make sure that customer knows what we provide that our competitors don't. But the big thing that really is a differentiator with PMI is we have a national footprint. And most people that own investment properties don't just own investment properties in Miami. They might own properties in Palm Beach. They might own investment properties in Orlando. They might have some in Tampa. And with our brand, if they're satisfied with the customer service and the product that we deliver, they're going to get that same service, that same product for all their properties. And I don't think there's very many property management companies that can provide that. And so that's a big differentiator with what we're able to do as a national brand in an industry that's full of small, fragmented, businesses.
Interesting. So on the franchise side, if someone's exploring a franchise, how does that work? So I'm a PMI franchise owner in Miami, and I land a account, and the gentleman has properties in North Carolina um, that need to be managed as well. Is that neighboring, or that PMI franchise owner working shoulder to shoulder with that franchise owner that acquired the account, or how does that work?
Not so much. It's mainly just a referral process that franchise in Miami says, "Hey, I've got a great owner down here in Miami. Just so happens that he owns some investment properties up there in North Carolina where you're at, And would you be open to, speaking with him about what you could offer him in North Carolina? And so usually it's just a referral system. Sometimes the franchisees will connect, like that example I just gave. Sometimes it comes through corporate, and we distribute out that referral or that lead, if you will. And sometimes the owners just find, they'll be like, hey, I'm working with PMI here in Miami. They'll go to our website and, oh, I can see that they've got one in North Carolina too. I got properties there. And they'll just reach directly to that franchise partner in North Carolina and connect.
Right, the power of the brand, though, right? So I'm PMI North Carolina. Boom, I'm getting a referral or a lead from a website because my franchise partner, colleague in Miami did a great job, and vice versa. That's really interesting, and the power of the expansion that you have had. I mean, I think in home services specifically, I feel like there's only a very small percentage of the brands that reach over three, 400 franchise owners, right? And so there's probably a lot of economy of scale and brand power that happens from that. That's amazing.
Absolutely. It's one of the great things about being part of a national brand and a group that is working hard together to elevate that brand. That's the cool thing about our franchise partners is everyone they own. These are independently owned and operated businesses. We call it a franchise, but these guys own these businesses, and that book of business or that portfolio that they're creating is theirs. They get to make as much money as they want. There's no ceiling based on a territory, that they might have. They can grow it as big as they want. And then on top of that, I haven't mentioned this yet, but our franchise is unique in that we offer multiple different sectors of property management that our franchise partners can expand to. For example, when we talk about property management, I'm assuming you and the audience is thinking single family residential property management. Yes, that's one sector of property management. We do provide all the tools and stuff available for our franchisees to build a business in that sector if they want. But we also provide short-term rental property management. We provide HOA property management. We provide commercial property management. And lastly, multifamily. That's your bigger apartment communities and condo communities and complexes like that. Each of these five, we call them pillars of property management, are very unique. They require different types of property management. You use different software, you use different marketing because your customer is different. In one case, you might have a tenant. In a short-term rental, you have a guest coming in for 5 days, and you got to have that property turned and cleaned and ready for the next guest to come in. And so these five different pillars of property management are very unique. Our franchisees come in, most of them start with residential property management there, but they have the ability to add different pillars as their business matures or as they choose to want to expand into others.
Right.
And that's
Really
been one of the
interesting.
reasons for our growth is a lot of property managers might be doing property management right now, but they've always wanted to do HOA or they want to expand into short-term rental, and they'll convert their existing property management business into a PMI and have that ability to expand and grow the way they want to without having to create it on their own.
It's like a built-in horizontal integration. They could just continue to expand their
Yep.
AUV and their services. All right, because you could sell more customers, cross sell, or raise your average ticket. In this case, they have multiple ways to
Yeah,
increase the
we refer
business.
to it as a property management platform that we built to help property managers scale their business quicker and more efficiently, more profitably than just trying to do it on their own.
Okay, so now switching gears. I'm sure at this point, after 450 franchise owners and 20 years, I'm sure you've had some come and exit, et cetera. But after working with all these different franchise partners, who is your ideal franchise owner? What's their background? What's their skill
Yeah,
set?
in the past and still currently we work with what we call startup franchise partners, meaning they've never done property management before. They might be a realtor, they might be an investor. They've always wanted to get into property management, and they purchase the franchise, and we train them to go out and get their very first property. Now, obviously, that is a long-term growth opportunity for them and us at corporate, because it takes time to build this portfolio that they're making money on. One cool component of property management is this is residual business we're talking about. You go out and you land that property, that owner, signs a management agreement with you. Unless you screw up, you're probably going to keep that management contract in place, and that management contract pays you month after month. And so we love our business because it's recurring revenue. We don't always have to chase down new business every month. And so if we're doing a good job at property management, we're increasing that portfolio. It's a scaling business that just produces more and more the longer you're in. So startup is what we do a lot of. We help a lot of new people get into the industry. But you asked what we prefer, or ideal franchisee is really kind of that example I gave earlier, which is a conversion. Conversion specifically is someone that's already doing property management. And usually the conversions are your small to mid-size. If it's a big property manager, they probably don't need the PMI brand and training and support. They probably already got a lot of that on their own. But we're working with a lot of small to mid-size property managers that want to expand, want to grow faster, want national presence and things like that. And so that's our ideal candidate, is these guys that have been doing it on their own for the last 2 to 10 years and just want to partner to scale their business quicker. And so we love taking those guys, introducing a lot more revenue streams, additional pillars, things like that, and help them grow quick. And that's where we get the most growth and they experience the most success quicker.
They're plugging into the technology, the brand, probably new lead generation tactics and
revenue
strategies.
streams. The average property manager only taps into 3 to 5 revenue streams. And our franchise partners have the ability to tap into 30 plus revenue streams. And so you can take that same portfolio as an existing property manager and add the PMI brand and our systems to it, and just with the same portfolio, elevate your profitability right out of the gate.
Right. Well, listeners, it's interesting. It's a fun. I think it's such a fun story. If you don't know my background before, launching Voda, and before my lead generation business, I was a franchise consultant, and my first ever placement was with a gentleman named Fernando, in Miami. And we're actually, to this day, we stay in touch. I've met with him for dinner, and sometimes when I'm in Miami, we've gotten together. And it's a great brand. I mean, it's you plug into it. It's a low investment. I think that's also a big
Fernando's
thing, right? If you're not doing a conversion.
Yeah, Fernando's still with our brand today, doing well in Miami, and we appreciate that referral, Dan.
Well, it's funny because he catapulted my career in the sense that I fell in love with seeing someone become a franchise owner and then watching them. I've watched him grow for, it's almost 10 years now, since then. And it inspired me to get into becoming a franchisor, because, I'm sure you're the same way. I love everything about being a franchisor. The ups and downs are part of the journey for the franchise owner. And I love it. Like, we'll have a franchise owner call us 6 months in. What the hell did I do? I don't want to do this anymore. Get me out. And we'll say, dude, hang on, just stay tight. And then 3 months later, everything changes. And then 3 years later, it's a whole nother, world they're in, right? Where they're succeeding. And I love it. And I'm sure the same way to have been doing this for as long as you have been. So what's next on the horizon? Like, where do you see, PMI going in the next, 3, 4, 5, 10 years?
Great question. Even at 450 franchise partners, we still feel like we are just getting started. We're in most states. I think we're in 47 or 48 states, but there's some entire states that we don't have a single franchise in, let alone being in every single city and metro area in the US. So we've got a lot of growth ahead of us. We're excited about the future, and the property management industry is one of those service industries that's not going away. Even with onset of AI, we love it because it's accelerating the way we do business, but it's not going to take our business away. People need property management, and it's just one of those things that's going to be around for a while, in my opinion. And so we love our future. We love where it's going, and plan on more growth.
Excellent. Steve, if someone wants to get in touch with the brand, what's the best way?
You can reach out to us on the web at pmifranchising.com, or pmicorp.com is the best way, and to reach out to us.
Excellent. Well, there you have it. Listeners, thanks again for tuning in to another episode. If you've enjoyed the episode, please do leave a 5-star review, or a review in general, so we can continue to spread the I Fired My Boss podcast and stories like Steve's. And we'll see you all on the next episode.
You're f***ing fired. If you want to say those words to your boss, make sure you head on over to ifiredmybosspodcast.com and fill out the form to schedule a no-cost consultation. And if you enjoyed this episode, make sure to subscribe, leave a review, and share with a friend who might also want to fire their boss.